Good. Thank you, Lilly. Maybe before we start, we could get a show of hands if you are completely new to this idea of news and information at a community foundation. Anybody new to this space?
Okay.
Okay, you are my people. This is good. Okay. So our story in Cleveland actually began a year ago at the Night Media Forum here in Miami, and it actually begins with a quote from Alberto, and so I wrote it down, so I want to read it to you because it sparked the whole journey for us a year ago. And his quote was, "Foundations have a critical role to play in both reestablishing trust in media and fostering media that can be trusted, and we need to rebuild common ground." So I've actually attended the Night Media Forum for the past 5 years, and I've been continuously impressed by what my peers at other community foundations are doing around the country, but I'm also the marketing guy at a community foundation. So this idea of how do I get my leadership team and a board of directors to understand why this could potentially be a strategic area of investment for us as a community foundation when resources are finite and you only have so many dollars to invest in the community. Knight invited us last summer to attend the First Amendment Conference and the Media Funders Forum, and there was another quote, so I'm a quote guy, and this is the one that really ignited the journey for us, and the quote was, "Community foundations represent the holy grail in funding for local news gathering." So in the span of 4 months, I've heard we have both the responsibility and the resources to get into this game, but I couldn't really figure out how to do it. At the same time, in Cleveland and Akron, there is no more crucial conversation to be having right now about local journalism, because in the city of Cleveland, from the year 2000 to last year, the Northeast Ohio Newspaper Guild went from 750 reporters to 253, and which means that 2/3 of our professional news gathering staff in the city of Cleveland are now gone. At the Plain Dealer, which is our daily newspaper of record, that number went from 350 to 70. And next month, it's expected that 29 union employees will be laid off. So what does this mean for a community foundation? It means for us that there's an information vacuum in the community. And to layer complexity on top of this, one of the projects we've been doing with Knight for the past 18 months is exploring adult literacy in our community. And in the city of Cleveland, 2 out of 3 adults ages 18 and over have a reading level of 4th grade or below. So not only can they get the information that they're looking for because the lack of capacity and resources from a local journalism perspective, but even if they are getting the information, the opportunity to actually comprehend that information is extremely limited. So as a community foundation, it's a big question for us, but the answer is, are we doing our job as a foundation if the nonprofits we are lifting up in our community, the residents aren't actually aware that those resources are available? So it represents an information gap, and it represents a huge missing component of our strategy. So these past 3 months, this is why we're 3 months old, we have partnered with the Knight Foundation to do a local media ecosystem project. If you take the academic jargon out of that, what that is really understanding what the environment is before we insert ourselves into the conversation. And so these past 3 months, we've done a 4-part research project. The first is to understand what are the local news and information assets that currently exist in the community. And we're looking at it for both Cleveland and Akron, because Akron is our sister city to the south. It's also a Knight community. And so it makes a lot of sense because people who live in Akron work in Cleveland and vice versa. So we need to understand what is the regional local media ecosystem. Second, and I would say most important to the work of the Community Foundation, is that we conducted 6 focus groups with residents, 3 in Cleveland and 3 in Akron. And this was an opportunity to just, at a very basic level, understand what are the information needs that residents have in both of these 2 cities. But at the same time, we would have been remiss if we didn't talk to local journalists. So we interviewed more than 20 local journalists in both Cleveland and Akron to understand the challenges that they're facing on the front lines, but also what opportunities they see in local journalism moving forward. And finally, the 4th part of this was content analysis. So it's great if we know what the assets are being put out there, but what kind of content are they putting out into the community? The big question is, what have we learned? And my answer is, I really don't know, because we just looked at the research last night, so it's less than 12 hours old, but there are a couple themes that have really jumped out to us and excite us as a partnership. I think the one theme is that residents in Cleveland and Akron overwhelmingly feel that the news is extremely negative. And they describe, and the theme that really emerged from these residents, who are the people that we serve in our community, and we are part of the community, is this idea of they are in basic survival mode. They need to know what information exists about housing, about job benefits, about Social Security, about health insurance. They need the basic survival information, and they feel that local journalism is not giving them that information because resident perspective that is not news and that is not enough to write a story about. This other idea that was really telling from residents, and I think this is not unique to Cleveland or Akron, but this idea of they are not actually represented in the newsroom. They don't see themselves in the newsroom. The lack of diversity in Cleveland, which is a majority African American community, if you go into newsrooms in that community, you are not going to see many journalists of color or any diverse background. So it has built a level of distrust between residents and journalism in Cleveland and Akron, which is pretty striking. So what has happened, and we've learned in this focus group, is this idea that they are going back to a community connector model, that instead of looking to news for information, they are doing the speak over the back fence in the home and talk to people who they trust in their neighborhood that can connect them to the information and resources that they need. They are not reading the newspaper. They are not looking at TV. They're talking to trusted networks within their community. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris now, but what I would say is the question that we are now grappling with is how do we take these information needs in our community and fill that into every aspect of our grant-making portfolio, because no matter if it's the arts or education or economic development, if people aren't aware of the nonprofits that we are lifting up, we are not doing our job as a community foundation. So it is a critical time for us to be having this conversation.
Yeah. I actually thought another really interesting finding was around the access or the lack of access to government data.
Yes, so to anybody who's watching from Cleveland, hello, but this is a really good point as well. No, it's good. So it is a tale of two cities between Akron and Cleveland in terms of transparent access to data. Reporters are struggling in the city of Cleveland to get access to basic data that the government should open up and provide, whereas in Akron, they get daily emails from the Department of Public Health with data. And right now we face a lead crisis in Cleveland. We face an opioid epidemic like many communities in this room. And if reporters cannot get that health information to unpack those issues and report on them in the community, that is an incredible challenge for them in their job. And there are reporters, let's be fair, who want to do this work, but they are restrained by the lack of transparency from government.
It felt like a low-hanging fruit. Like a funder could potentially nudge that, potentially. Chris, you're up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Wow, a lot of common themes that I'm sure we're seeing across the country. When you talk about survival mode from your residents, you know, when a newsroom goes into survival mode, it looks very different. They start following the police scanner and the city council agendas, and they don't have any time really to do enterprise reporting. And so to illustrate what's going on in Boulder County, I thought I would just open with two stories, different, separated in time, but on either side of our county jail. 17 years ago, when I was a reporter in our local paper, we got a call on a Friday afternoon from a caseworker at the county who said, I don't ever do this, but this story is just egregious and y'all need to do something or no one will. Joseph Webb is about to be evicted from his many years long home here in the mobile home park, and it's because the California-based landlord says he's a few months back on rent. The thing is, he has a spinal degenerative disease, and he is owed $20,000 from Social Security. The judgment has come down. This is just a timing thing. The landlord's going to get their money, but what they want to do is squeeze out the outdated structures from the park, and they're leveraging this opportunity. We had a story in the paper about it on Saturday, and by Monday, the Community Foundation had responded to an influx of donor interest by opening a fund that exists today. It's called Doorways for the Disabled. It was a lifesaver for Joseph Webb, and it continued to spin off some funds for people that were in housing transitional crisis. That is a story of a civic infrastructure that has a healthy newsroom working in its community. Let's fast forward to this past year. On the other side of the county jail, there's another mobile home park. In this case, they've had water quality issues for many years. This is something that is so bad that residents there are no longer showering using the water out of the tap because it smells like chlorine. They're not drinking it. And so these people who are most low-income residents of our community are spending upwards of $200 a month on bottled water and making do, figuring out how to bathe. This is a story that the local health department and the city and the county and the community foundation and others have been involved in trying to fix from behind the scenes, but scant news about it in the local paper. The reporter who was the best reporter at the local paper was interested in doing a big investigation on it. She got a little bit along the road, but she quit in December. Today, we are back in Boulder. I'm sorry to be missing the memorial service for our editor at the local paper who succumbed to cancer recently and is being remembered today. Neither his position nor the City Hall beat reporter's position will be refilled. So we're missing this big chunk of our civic infrastructure. And what that means is that we have a threatened democracy on a local level. So what are we going to do about it? We have a good start. I left some of these magazines on your chair. For the last 20 years, we've had an indicators report on the social, economic, and environmental health of Boulder County. In the last go-round, we took a journalistic tack, and we started doing a twofold step. One, it used to be an analysis of what's going on. Then we took the additional step of saying, let's not just see what's new and persistent. Now let's find the people who are living at the center of this, give it a 2-year shelf life, and hire former reporters. Unfortunately, there's talent on the sidelines to do this. And so they came up with this report. We're in production for the biennial report for this year right now. But in addition, with the help of someone in the room here, Lindsay Green Barber and the Knight Foundation, we've been working on what we're starting to call an equity reporting initiative. We've been hearing from our stakeholders that the Trends Report is one of the best things. In fact, they rated it as the best thing that we do. We thought it'd be the grant making, but they like the Trends Report. We're assuming they like the grant making. And it could be larger. But there's several aspects to the equity reporting initiative. First of all, we would like to roll out a Trends podcast. So that when we release this report, if we're able to pull this together, we would be able to hire a Latino bilingual journalist and in partnership with our local community radio, be able to not just have a 2-year shelf life on a magazine, but to be able to take some stories to ground. Start to literally provide some of this backfill where enterprise reporting has dropped off. We're talking investigative reporting, solutions-oriented reporting, narrative journalism, explanatory journalism. And then we also foresee trying to build a solutions fund, because we at the Community Foundation have the opportunity to stand on both sides of the story, both to support the civic infrastructure of local news on an enterprise level, but then also to help add some accelerant to the potential community response. This can take many forms, from convening to advocacy, to community organizing, to grant making. And then finally, we seek to initiate an equity reporting lab. This would be something that worked with our existing media in all formats to get them the training and support and even funding for enterprise stories. I talked recently with, I'm still friends with many over there at the local paper. One of them said, oh, by the way, there was another story. We were working on a 5-part series on affordable housing, but that's just evaporated. We simply don't have the staff. They're expecting 3 more layoffs in the coming weeks. So one last note is that, you know, I mentioned in passing that we want this to be a Latino bilingual journalist. The reason is that also with the Knight Foundation, you know, we've been looking very closely, working with our Latino leaders in our community. Richard Garcia is here in the back of the room, one of our leaders from our Community Foundation. And we've been working with a team and really coming to the conclusion that the messenger is the message. So one of the recommendations on the Knight Commission on Trust and Democracy said we got to diversify newsrooms, but we're getting to the why behind the what of that. And really, until we start hiring people who have the same common experiences as those who we seek to report on and help move in the community, we're going to continue to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, yeah. And I think an important point, Chris, is for the Community Foundation of Boulder County, you guys are, my understanding is one of your values is equity, right?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that.
And as a core component of your grant making. And so as you're thinking about the Equity Journalism Fund, you know, it's really a sweet spot that I want to tease out later. Next, Mauricio.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lilly, for inviting us. We met a year ago, and it's great to be able to share together in this forum. I can say that my story has many different layers. As a staff of the Community Foundation, you have a person working in marketing and communications, you have a former journalist, and you have a student. So I approached a lot of the work that I'm going to share with you from the point of view of wanting to learn from the people that are doing this work. We also agreed that we were going to share some ideas, but we want to invite you to share your own challenges, your own solutions to some of the same questions that we're dealing with, because we believe that there is a lot of wisdom in the room that might benefit us as well as we continue in this journey. We've been, as Silicon Valley Community Foundation, we've been working on this space now for 5 years, thanks to support that we received from the Knight Foundation. And I believe that the Knight Media Forum is like a university, again, coming at it as a student. So I've learned a great deal about what we have done in our community, thanks to the forum that you've created for us. Another layer of our work is that there is an internal component that I'll be sharing with you as a staff of the Community Foundation. And there is an external component, and I want to call on John Funibiki, who is our partner with Renaissance Journalism in the Bay Area, who's been leading the external efforts to engage journalists and media makers in a region to build a collaborative, of which I'm going to make a couple of references as well. And John is over there trying to not show his hand, but please understand that I'm only giving you part of the story. He has another part of the story that is critical for our work. When we started this journey, I would say that most of our work with journalists was transactional. It was a contract for journalists to come and tell our story. It was about us as a community foundation utilizing the resources of journalists and media makers to create a report that will tell the wonderful work that we are doing. 4 years ago, we had the great fortune of receiving some resources from the Knight Foundation and an invitation to ask a question to explore how the Community Foundation might address the news and information challenge in our community. We were part of the Knight Community Information Challenge at the time. So we didn't hear any of that. What we heard was, we have an opportunity to do some PR for one of our critical projects. Again, how do we get the word out? So we went from being preoccupied with how we tell our story to how do we get the word out about our work in the community. Thanks to the support of the Knight Foundation, we were told, stop it. That's not it. And after a year of going back and forth and raising some critical questions about our view of the world, and in particular journalism, we realized that the question had more to do with our community and access to information in the context of the community, and the journalism ecosystem that we were connected or disconnected with more so than what the Community Foundation was going to tell the world about the work that we were doing, whether it was through a story or an outreach effort. So we went from a contract to going back and forth with a question about what role do we play in the community. And once we got clear with the support of John, we made another significant shift to where we are right now. And I need to read it, or else it will take me a few more minutes than I have to share the transition that we took from just posing the question to internalizing that question into concrete work that the Community Foundation can commit itself to. We began to imagine, with the support of John and many in the community, in our local journalism ecosystem, what might happen if local news and media organizations collaborate to address the challenges that the Community Foundation cares a great deal about. It's a different place. Taking into consideration the journey from being preoccupied with getting our story out to having an understanding of the fact that we can create a partnership, that we can actually promote collaboration, that solutions journalism can come out of that process, that community organizations can be engaged in also generating news and information and stories that can be transformative, was probably a 5-year-long journey. What I think allowed us to go from one to the other end of this journey was the full commitment of our president and CEO, Dr. Emmert Carson, who believed that it was important for the Community Foundation not only to be preoccupied with the impact that we are making, but also to elevate the impact that communities are making. And what he pushed us to consider is not the creation of a program in isolation, but how do we introduce journalism in our grant-making work, in our donor engagement work, in our corporate responsibility work, in our initiative and special projects. And where we are right now, and I want to give you a few examples, is continuing to experiment about this integration by identifying the issues that we care most about: immigration, education, housing and transportation, economic security, and civic participation, and building collaborative efforts with journalists and media makers in each one of those spaces. To give you an example, we're presently in conversations with Univision. We'll be there tomorrow to talk about the census. They're building a strategy, a nationwide strategy. They want to implement it in our community. We are interested in facilitating that process, but how can it be connected to the collaborative effort that's going on locally? How can it engage the rural sectors of our community so that it can be fully impactful? Those are questions that we're bringing to the table. We participated with City Lab in a collaborative with the Knight Foundation, KQED, in looking at what are the urban challenges in Silicon Valley. And interestingly enough, housing, education, immigration surface as critical issues affecting the community, which echo what the Community Foundation is interested in. So we didn't have to worry about bringing the story out. In promoting our work, the community also was able to guide us and identify some of the same challenges that we have identified, and more so creating solutions to address some of them. And the last two, one is the work that we're doing with the Renaissance journalism effort that John is leading, which is building a Bay Area media collaborative, which got started from a group of journalists coming together in a roundtable and realizing that we needed to do something about the most critical challenges in our community. Housing was identified, and they said, but there is a way to do it in a much more impactful manner, and that's through collaboration. So we continue experimenting with the support of the Knight Foundation, trying to figure out how best to create a model that works in our region. And we're also creating a fund or exploring the process by which we can create a fund to support journalism in our region. We do not have a grant-making strategy. We want to integrate our work across the community foundation, but the fund is an opportunity for us to invite other funders locally to go on this journey with us and continue to learn and grow with us. So thank you.